Welcome everyone to today's Insight Group webinar, Evolve Your Social Customer Support Strategy to deliver personalized and meaningful experiences. As we get into the fourth quarter of the year, it's a great time to start thinking about your goals and strategies for 2018. And over the next hour, we'll be discussing best practice and top tips that you can use to supercharge your social media customer support in the year ahead. I'm Aaron Jackson, a project director here at the Insight Group, and I'm pleased to be joined today by a great panel of brand speakers. Firstly, calling in from the East Coast, we have Calvin St. Juste. He's the head of digital customer support at Comcast, the communications and telecom company. And then joining us from Canada, we have another communications and telecoms company, and that's Margaret Suji, senior manager of social media support at Rogers. And then from the West Coast, we have calling in Armand Belding, who's the senior social media strategist for Campbell eWorld, who've been working closely with Covered California, who are a healthcare insurance provider, healthcare insurance platform over on the West Coast. So alongside today's great panel, you are also a vital part of today's webinar. I'm really pleased that we have hundreds of you signed up for today, including people from FedEx, Dell, MasterCard, Papa John's, Delta Airlines, NBC, Universal, and many more from all around the world. So it's great to see so many countries involved. So yeah, please do. I urge you to type your questions into the chat box, and we can incorporate those into today's discussion throughout the webinar. So yeah, the sooner you ask, the better. Really, we can start getting those included. There's also a hashtag for today, and you can see it on the top right of your screen. That's InsightCS. Again, on the top right of the screen. So any additional thoughts or questions, do feel free to tweet away. Hashtag INCITECS. So before I hand over to today's panelists, I'd like to kickstart today's webinar with our first poll, which should be coming onto your screens very shortly. So if you look at your screens now, you should see that poll. So the question is, to what level do you feel your company is providing customer service over social media? Are you offering best class social media support? You're providing a good experience, but maybe have a little way to go. You're providing it at quite a basic level, or maybe you're just starting out. So if you can answer that poll on your screens now, it is anonymous, so please don't be shy. You know, this is completely anonymous. We just want to get a good gauge for who's listening today. So if you start answering that now, I can see the answers coming in, and closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, great. So the poll should be coming onto your screen shortly. As we can see, the results are actually quite surprising. We have quite a lot of you just starting out with social media customer service. But then actually we have quite a few as well who think they're providing a good experience. It's actually pretty mixed, but I'm surprised at how many are just starting out. And I guess for the 7% that are offering best in class, you know, yeah, let me know who you are, and we can definitely get you on for a webinar in the future. So yeah, I guess I'd like to bring our panelists in. Calvin, coming to you first, are you surprised to see so many people starting out with social media customer service?
And absolutely. I think to your point around, you know, looking at all the different brands that we have here and understanding the fact that, you know, customers are using social media as their channel of choice. I think, you know, to your point, while on one hand it's good that folks are really understanding that this is truly the medium where customers are looking to interact with the brand, but I think there's obviously some level of heavy lifting that individuals obviously need to begin focusing on, because I can tell you, there's been so many different studies and projections that, you know, by 2020, we're looking at, if not 90+% of our customers are going to be using the social media as that sort of channel from a customer service perspective.
Wow, that's a great stat to have, and I think, you know, we have quite a varied audience from around the world, lots of different types of industries and different types of companies. So I guess, Armand, coming to you, I know you've worked with kind of a few different companies, and, you know, Campbell eWorld's got quite a few different accounts. Do you think that maybe it's the smaller companies that are kind of just starting out? Do you think there's, you know, room for any kind of larger companies now to not be on social media?
Certainly not to avoid it entirely. I think that's kind of out of the question at this point. I think most brands, certainly the biggest ones and even the smaller ones, are realizing that social is a place where you can have an impact very quickly and very efficiently as well, from a proactive marketing standpoint and also from a reactive customer care standpoint. Unfortunately, I think that many brands are still kind of not paying enough attention to what social can bring them from a customer service perspective, whether it's out of fear or nervousness because of the potential liability or risk of something going viral or something like that, or they're just not sure why they should do that when they already have a perfectly good call center. So I'm actually surprised. I looked at a Nielsen report, I think from last year, that said only 30% of retail marketers are active in social media customer support, for example. So I found that surprising. But it's much more popular in other industries like airlines and telecom. So I think it's just a evolution that's going to take place over time as more and more brands and more people at the executive level start to see the business sense in performing customer care using social platforms, which we know more and more people in general are spending more and more time on, and in particular on mobile devices where this is certainly viable.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say only 30% of retail when, as Calvin just mentioned, 90% of customers are going to be there by 2020. So yeah, that is surprising. Margaret, so you're obviously a bit down the line now with your support strategy. You're starting to get to that, I guess, quite mature stage. Do you have any tips for the people that are just starting out? Obviously, we're going to come on to some kind of new strategies and best practice for those people that are all doing well later. But I'm interested just at the start of the webinar to hear if you've got any tips for those people. I guess putting the first toe in the water of social media customer support.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like a senior citizen in this space. I call it the years in social, like dog years, I guess. I think the biggest thing that we've really gained from is talking to other folks in the space and learning from them and figuring out what it is that they're doing, how they're measuring, how they're operating, how did they win over executives, things like that. Like it's those war stories that I think are extremely useful. And so sessions like today, and I'd love to know 7% offering best in class. Who are you? Let's get together. Let's have a chat and let's figure out how we can learn from each other.
Has a great approach to learn from each other, and it's weird. It feels like quite a small world well, especially in social media customer service, if not customer service in general. So I think that's a nice mentality that everyone has of coming together and really helping each other out. I guess kind of in that vein, we actually have a case study now from Armin. As I mentioned, he's been working with Covered California over in the US, and I guess kind of really refine the social media support strategy. So we have some slides from Armin, which should be coming on your screen now. And Armin, I guess without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to you to kind of take us through that case study and talk a little bit about the work you've been doing there.
Absolutely, be my pleasure. So hi again, everybody. So I work with Campbell Ewald. We're a full-service advertising agency, but I've been embedded on-site with my client, Covered California, which is a government institution out here in the state of California. It's a health insurance exchange marketplace that was established by the Affordable Care Act. It's the largest as far as number of enrollees and number of people served marketplace, that's a state-run marketplace in the nation, and has been the largest single contributor to people purchasing health insurance through the Affordable Care Act outside of healthcare.gov. So it's a fairly large organization. And in my opinion, is really forward-thinking as far as its use of social media in general, certainly for government organizations where it's a little bit less common, but in particular in regards to customer care. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about that today. I've been there embedded for about 3 years and kind of built the program from the ground up. So we can talk about it from the perspective of somebody who's just getting started and then now at a point where I feel like we're really a strong performer. So with that, we'll move forward. And back on the first slide, it said it's not just an obligation, it's an opportunity. And what that means for me and what I want to try to impart to all of you is that this isn't something that should be approached from the perspective of only, well, everybody's on it, so we have to do it. And it's like, oh, well, I have to take the garbage out, right? It's like you have to do it, otherwise it piles up and it smells bad and your neighbors judge you for having too much garbage. That's not what this is about. This is about, yes, that is there. There's a lot of people out there who need help and who are asking our brand for assistance, but this is also an opportunity to build relationships in a unique way with those consumers. And that makes good business sense, and that builds loyalty, and it's just really a tremendous, unique opportunity that's very distinct from just like a call center or just like a regular live chat on a website. So moving forward, we have Cover California social community here. These numbers tend to fluctuate, as all of you can imagine, but just to give you a rough sense of what we're working with. And we also have Spanish language support as well, so we have Spanish language channels to go along with our multi-segment. We'll go to the next slide. So the first thing, when I came in about 3 years ago, we're dealing with obviously Cover California and the Affordable Care Act is a political entity of some sort, or at least there's a lot of political energy around the Affordable Care Act. And you can imagine that that combined with this being a new program and it being of such a large scale, there was a tremendous amount of activity on social media around Cover California around the time that it launched and even continuing now. And there was a relatively small operation on the social side that was dealing with how to respond to these folks. And so I was brought in, and basically we're in a situation where there's hundreds and thousands of comments and posts and tweets coming in. A lot of them are unaddressed, and you have a situation where you're creating a liability situation. You have press, you have earned media, there's a risk, you have people who genuinely need help, right? Most importantly, your consumers are not getting the responses quickly, and it's creating animus, right? There's a lot of negative energy that can be created from not helping those folks. Then you have trolls who are steering the conversation instead of the brand in some cases. You're trying to put your marketing content out there to create positive energy, and it's just getting deflated because you have haters who are coming in, or trolls, or pick a label, and just kind of derailing your message. So your brand reputation is at stake. Your brand perception can be damaged. And also, there's also unseen errors that can come up. Technical errors. You can have website outages or other things that frequently are reported first by your consumers on social, even before your own teams may detect them. At least in our case, we've noticed that in some user experience issues. So sometimes, if you're not managing that properly or monitoring it effectively, those can go unreported and can linger. So this was kind of the environment that I was coming into. There was some support happening, but generally speaking, there was a tremendous amount of commentary that was not really being involved with from the brand's perspective. We'll go to the next slide. So what did we do about it? So basically we said, we want to take this and not just respond to it from the perspective of we want to reduce risk. We want to take this and convert it into a high-functioning program. So we took our primary accounts at that time, which were just Facebook and Twitter, and we're going to make them marketing and customer service platforms, including with Spanish language support. So we expanded the size of our team. We're still relatively small. We have several agency team members and also several client team members, so we're very collaborative. We work together very closely. It's a really strong relationship. We adopted tools to help us do this because doing it organically on the page is very difficult at scale. It's almost impossible. So we adopted Lithium Response for customer care and Reach for marketing. And then we had organizational buy-in. And this was, these two bottom ones here are probably maybe two of the most important. One was, it wasn't, and I'm sure a lot of the people on the webinar can relate to this, which is frequently social media in general tends to float around between different departments. Sometimes groups don't know where to put it. Is it in marketing? Is it in comms? Where does it live? And so we had to get organizational buy-in from all of the respective departments within Cover California, including executive leadership, to say, hey, this is a really great opportunity here. This is unusual because it's kind of like a startup mentality, which doesn't happen too often in government. And we have, the opportunity here to make an impact. And there's also obviously a need. So we got buy-in from everyone, including comms and marketing and IT and policy, and it was just like a full, everybody's on board to move forward. And then we had an escalation process implemented, which was also critical because occasionally, and frequently I should say, you'll have customer issues that for example, a live chat rep or a social media service rep can't answer. So there needs to be a valve, a release valve for those really hard to solve cases where you can escalate to another team and then have them contact the customer separately and rapidly. So having that is essential because sometimes those folks who need the most help are also the ones who are making the most noise and who are the most upset, which makes sense, but it's important to be able to help them as quickly and effectively as possible. Next slide, please. Great. So this is just a quick review of a few stats from last year's deadline date. So for those of you who are not familiar, the open enrollment period in the United States varies, I think, but generally is in the fall. And last year for Cover California was from November 1st until January 31st. And as most people tend to do, and I certainly do in some areas of my life, you wait till the last minute. So you have a lot of people who are desperate to get insured and buy their insurance coverage on the last possible day they can, which was January 31st. So overall, over the entire open enrollment period last year, our social channels received over 100,000 unique posts. We had a less than a 1% flush rate, which means that our team touched every single post that came in. Every comment, every tweet, every response to a comment, we looked at a minimum, looked at them and read them to say to ourselves, okay, does this thing need assistance? Do we have to interject here? Do we have to respond? And like, what's the importance level of this case? And I know that that's fairly rare. I know that some brands are really good about that, but I know that other brands sometimes they just don't have the staff or the capacity, and they have large percentages of flush rate, so they just cannot handle many posts that come in. They just ignore them, or they're just at the wrong time of day, or they're only handling what's coming in during certain times of day. And I really want to encourage folks to say, no, it doesn't matter when it comes in. We're going to set up a system whereby we can handle everything that comes in, and we want people to know that we're listening all the time. So anyways, these stats just reflect the final deadline day last year, January 31st, which I know these numbers may seem fairly small, but again, we're a team of 5 people, so this is, for us, was a lot of work. And you can see it's a constant flow. The incoming post graph, that's like Facebook and Twitter posts, and then on the right side is our responses. And I would actually direct you to kind of a funny, I love when data tells stories, and you can see around the 4:30, 5 o'clock mark there that there's a huge dip, and that's because we all had to go home. And we kept working when we got home, but that second dip is when we had dinner. So there's a story to be told, but basically we just kept going and kept going and kept going until 12:30 at night. And we were able to get a 91% response rate within 2 hours, which was the goal that we have set for ourselves. And 2.1 responses per conversation. So basically, it's not just, hey, here's the answer to your question, and we'll see you later. It's, hey, how can we help you? Let's have a dialogue, and let's build a relationship. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what was the net result of all of this work, right? Over this entire open enrollment period, we responded tens of thousands of times to tens of thousands of unique individuals with a litany of issues. And health insurance, as everybody knows, is complicated. There's a lot of ins and outs. It's a new program, relatively speaking. There's a lot of questions and uncertainty. So some of these responses are fairly dense. It's not as simple as, oh, here's the link to reset your password. I mean, some of these are pretty complicated issues. And in spite of that, with a small team, I'm so proud of the work that we did because we were able to flip the script. So basically, one of the great things that our tool helps us do is measure the sentiment of the conversations that are happening. So that's a really key metric for us, which I know that everybody wants to know about metrics and how can they justify the work that they're doing and the money that they're spending. For us, one of them was sentiment conversion. So what's the attitude of somebody when they come in, and then what's the attitude when they leave as far as their interaction with us. So when they came in, you can see that a majority were negative and neutral, with a handful of positive folks, and most of those people were supporting our content. And then in the next slide, when they're done, we flipped it significantly. So we had a huge bump in positive sentiment increase. And our customer service, when we did a huge survey, we basically did a massive analysis of all social media mentions of the brand and related brands. And our customer service was the most popular and strongly held positive topic, basically, of all topics. So we were thrilled with that at the end of the last open enrollment period. Next slide, please. So one of the other things that we've done is, because we're really proud of this project and with this team, we said to ourselves, you know what, it's not good enough that we're in a reactionary capacity, that we're just taking what's coming at us. We want people to know that they can do this. So we've actually put paid dollars, paid social media and marketing dollars behind content to let people know that these are available, this option is available. Most people don't think of their government when they think of social media, as far as like, they don't think that they can tweet at the DMV necessarily and get a response. They have to make an appointment, they go down to the office. In our case, we want to say, hey, if you have a question about this, or like how your account works, or how to access a certain link on the website or something, we want you to come to us first because we're fast, and we can build that dialogue and build that relationship. And the most interesting thing was we got really high engagement rates from this content, and surprisingly, Twitter was even higher than Facebook. Typically, it's the other way around. If you have any social marketers on the call, you may notice your engagement rates on Facebook tend to be higher generally than on Twitter, at least in my experience. But in this case, it was the opposite. Twitter was really, really strong for us from a customer service perspective because people see the brand, they're able to have that immediate one-on-one interaction and not have to worry as much about dealing with a giant commenting section, like a public comment on a Facebook post, for example. So anyways, we're really happy with this. The one on the left was actually a GIF, so it was like, it would look like a live conversation with emojis. That was pretty fun. But we've continued to integrate this kind of proactive social media customer care awareness building content in our paid strategy, and it's continued to be effective, and we'll keep doing it moving forward. Next slide, please. So this is really the nuts and bolts of what I want to convey to everybody. So all of these core fundamentals are critical to not only the work that we did, but I think are so important to all of this for any business and any agency or any kind of project you're working on that involves the social space generally, but in particular with social customer care. So let's keep moving forward. So the huge thing for me is starting at the foundations. What are the building blocks of what you're trying to accomplish? And then when that ladders up, when you accomplish those things, it ladders up and you have business success, as opposed to starting with, is this the only thing that's going to be efficient, and then trickling down from there and worrying about some of the other stuff later. So as far as this, it's what is the kind of attitude of people when they're coming into this situation, right, from a consumer's perspective. So frequently it's out of desperation or last resort, right? Some people come as a first point of contact. They'll have a bad experience, they'll just tweet it out immediately, right? My guess is that a lot of times those folks, some of them are probably on Twitter all the time tweeting out their thoughts about everything. But then you have other situations where it's really a desperate situation, right? Something really bad has happened. They can't get into their account when they need it or something like that. And they just say, you know what, I'm going to try to solve this problem by flaming this brand publicly. Or by going to their Facebook page and slamming their piece of content because I've just had a series of negative experiences. But oftentimes in our case, we see a lot of desperation and last resort. They've tried other resources, nothing has worked. Frequency of use and access to social channels, they're on mobile, right? People are texting more than they're talking on the phone. I've had numerous cases where I've called friends and they're like, why are you calling me? Just text me, right? When you're live chatting on Facebook chat or Twitter DM, that's essentially a text message conversation, right? It's the same interface. It feels the same emotionally to the consumer when they're doing it. So for them to do it on those platforms is basically a similar type of interaction, and to bring that with a brand is something special as opposed to just an individual. Speed, so they're expecting fast responses and really rapid solutions. For consumers, this is a big one. Their truth is their reality. What this means is their understanding of the problem, of what their issue is what they believe to be true. So I've seen a lot of times brands will respond to a consumer and it almost sounds patronizing, or it may sound like assuming something, as opposed to meeting the consumer at their level, right? Saying, okay, as an agent who's responding to your issue, I'm going to try to understand, I'm going to have empathy, I'm going to say, okay, this person's understanding of the situation is X, so I'm going to respond in real time with clarifying to make sure I understand what their situation is, and then trying in a polite way to respond with the best possible answer that I can that's original to that consumer's issue, as opposed to a form response or a boilerplate. And consumers can totally tell the difference, by the way, between boilerplate responses and authentic responses. Consumer and brand relationship emotions, these are huge. You get to build a relationship when you're talking to them. It's really that simple. If you're not a robot, if you're having an authentic back and forth and you're understanding and the consumer feels as though they're being listened to, you can establish that respect and that relationship. You can win people over or lose them doing this. If you're helping to solve their problem quickly and you have empathy and you're able to understand their issue from their perspective, you can win them over. Or if you are just trying to move through it as quickly as possible and you share a link to something that doesn't work properly, or the wrong link or the wrong piece of information of what they're looking for, it can backfire. And that's also a risk. So it's important to do it the correct way and to have the right approach. So I love this quote: a single negative post on social has on average the impact of 5 positive posts, right? I don't know if anybody on this call has ever done influencer marketing before, but that's a fun trip when you have a lot of effort and money that may go into working with an influencer, and it takes a long time and it gets out there and you're so happy with it, but then the next day another influencer who has a problem with your product comes out and tweets out or posts something on Facebook that's negative about your brand, and it's way harder to clean that up, right? So it's keeping in mind that the positives are just tougher to get and they require more volume than the negative, so it's how do you mitigate the negative. Let's go to the next slide, please. Great. Tools are essential, right? Especially if you're going to be doing this at scale. Ooh, which one are we going to? Okay, culture and purpose. I'll get to tools in a second. So I'll go through this very quickly. A lot of the stuff I've already said in the last slide, but make sure that you're doing this for the right reasons, right? Building a culture of purposeful service and putting customers first is so important. So a great example of that is if you have a system set up whereby you're only your primary metric is judging your agents or your team on how fast they are at responding. That can potentially create a perverse incentive where they're going to just close out cases as quickly as humanly possible, share the response to the consumer, close it out, and they're not going to worry as much about the relationship. They're not going to worry as much about consumer satisfaction with the response. Like it can dovetail into negative space. So if you're putting the consumer first, it's guaranteeing that you're giving the best, most authentic response possible and making sure that they're satisfied with whatever that conversation was, even if it takes a little bit longer. Because at the end of the day, you're going for a long-term gain of putting them first, and they'll know it and they'll feel it, and that's the relationship building that I'm talking about. It's not an obligation, it's an opportunity, right? Building the team requires the right kinds of people. So if you're hiring folks, I would encourage looking for people who have a natural joy. They feel naturally good about helping others. They don't complain if they have to send out holiday cards around New Year's time, right? They genuinely want to do that kind of stuff. They want to help carry somebody's groceries inside. They feel good. It makes them feel good to give. That type of feeling and a natural empathy is so important, as is other characteristics like writing skills, listening skills, a sensitivity to the PR component of all of this, right? If you have a collective brand voice and a personality, who is your brand? How do you guys communicate? What's your attitude? Making sure that everybody on the team understands that and is on board and is able to communicate in writing quickly and maintaining that brand voice, that's also super important. And then awareness of the big picture, right? So if they're dealing with a consumer who's a VIP, or someone who's a journalist, or just understanding what the potential risks are from having a conversation on social media, and there are risks, but just being aware of what that is and how that all kind of fits together in the grand scheme of things is really important as well. Next slide, please. Great. So tools, really, really important. If you're doing this at scale, you have to have a tool. For us, it's Lithium, and it's really helped us with the analytics and with a lot of the ability to kind of maintain the conversations and the long-term relationships that we have with consumers. So making sure that something is relatively easy to use and simple, right? You can just plug your team in, you can train them quickly, you can say this is what you need to know, and at the same time on the back end, if you're a manager or an executive, you can quickly get the results that you need to demonstrate that the product is working. You have multi-channel support, so you need Facebook and Twitter support. Case prioritization, how do you know which ones are most important? If it's a PM, if it's a DM, if it has certain tags associated with it of certain topics, that's critical. Topic tagging is really important, right? People want to know, what are our consumers talking about? This is a really easy way to do that. Some of it can be automated, some of it can be manual. Either way, though, you can produce reports based on those tags and know which topics and which issues are most common at any given time, either day to day or week to week, month to month, what have you. Historical conversations is also critical. Part of the relationship building process with anyone is remembering the last conversation you had with them, right? It's really embarrassing if you go to a networking event and you see somebody and you have no idea who they are or what you talked about last time, but you recognize them, right? You have to say, what was your name again? And where do you work? And oh yeah, it's this thing, right? That's not as comfortable as being like, oh, hey, so-and-so, last time we talked about this and that was great, right? You just skipped like 20 minutes of banter. And in social customer care, it's the same thing. So if you're able to say, hi, so-and-so, it's great to hear from you again. How's it going? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that you're having this issue. How can we help you? Right? It's relationship building. It's continuous. It's over years. Having that historical conversation is so important. Ease of team collaboration and sharing, super critical as well, as far as getting approvals and making sure that everybody's on the same brand voice. Singular voice is a fun one for us. So different brands handle this in different ways. For us, we don't use initials or names in our social responses. So we don't say the agent with this name is the person who's helping you right now. We make it singular brand voice, so it's always the brand as the entity that's talking to the consumer. I don't think there's a requirement to do that or not, but we prefer it. Because one, we don't want customers to feel as though if they switch agents that they're getting different levels of service. So if they talk to me one day and then they talk to somebody else the next day, we want that brand voice to be consistent so they can feel as though they're maintaining a positive growth in the relationship with the brand directly. Also, consuming or talking to consumers on social is the only way, or the only place that I know of where you can have that kind of private, intimate conversation with the brand, right? You're personifying the brand. You're bringing it down from the abstract concept of a brand into the, hi, we're the brand. How can we help make this a better day for you, right? How can we help solve this problem? And also tools offering mobile support as well is really helpful. Next slide, please. And I think I need to speed up. So I kind of already talked about this, organizational buy-in, right? making sure you have well-trained team, you have the resources that you need to do this, to try to, at least to try it out, right? If you're kind of new to this, sell it hard, right? There's a lot of benefits. Everybody knows good customer service leads to loyalty, which leads to good business. And the next level of that is relationship building and long-term relationship building. And I don't want to use this word, but like intimacy, right? Like you know them intimately. You have had multiple conversations with them. You're friendly. It's colloquial. It's like, okay, let's take this to the next level. So selling that hard and getting the resources you need to be able to do this is really important, because if you only go into it halfway, you know, you might not get what you're looking for. Speed, so making sure that all the other teams in the organization who may be involved in helping to resolve these issues understand that you're dealing in a social media environment where things move really quickly. So just make sure that everybody knows, hey, we got this VIP or this person who's coming in with a really vocal issue on social. We have to resolve this faster maybe than something else. At least that's my approach. And then determining which organizational teams need to be involved or need to at least be aware of what's going on with social customer care generally. So here's just a list of some of the ones that we work with, and I know that must vary by organization, but just think about that in the big picture. Next slide, please. Awesome, quality of service. So this is pretty standard stuff, right? But it's just important to keep in mind, because some of these are more functional and some of them are more about that personality component. So speed is obvious, right? Be fast, but not careless, right? Focus on building the relationship, but do it quickly if you can. Consumers are expecting responses faster and faster these days, and think about it from this perspective. If you're texting your friend or a loved one and they don't respond to you within an hour, even an hour can be too long for a lot of people, right? But that's like offensive. It's like, what, am I not important enough for you to respond to me right now, right? It's a bothersome problem. And so when you're texting with a consumer, essentially, which is what Facebook chat or Twitter chat or any of the others are, is basically the same thing. It's offensive if they have to wait for many hours or days for a response. It's shocking to me. The expectation is so high from consumers. If you look up research from Nielsen and others on this, many are expecting responses within an hour or 3 hours, and many brands sometimes take days to respond on average, and to me that's unacceptable. So think about it from like, can I help improve that relationship, or am I going to damage it, right? Knowledge, be knowledgeable, know your product, know how to respond quickly and accurately. For us it may be a little bit easier because we have such a small team, but make sure that when you're training folks, everybody knows what the products are, what the policies are, how to solve the most frequently asked questions, and doing so ideally without a boilerplate response, because consumers can totally tell. And they accuse us of being robots all the time, even though our responses are authentic, and we'll just respond with like, you know, beep boop or something fun like that, just to keep it light. Resources, have all that stuff available for your team when they need them. Solutions, again, delivering answers to folks. It's not just a DIY situation where you give them a link and leave them alone. That's one thing to do as a starting point, but then following up if you can, right? Making sure that they have their question answered, or that they're at least pointed in the right direction where you know they can get additional help if they need it. Authenticity, I've already covered that. And then decency, right? These kinds of things, these emotions are not talked about enough, I don't think, in this space. It makes good business sense to be a good person, right? To be empathetic, to admit fault when it's appropriate, right? When something is wrong or something doesn't work correctly, be like, wow, that should not happen, or we are so sorry to hear about this frustration. We want to help you solve this problem, and we're here to you know, for your service. And follow up as much as you can. So it's just the same types of emotions and behavior that you would expect from a good friend. Be the consumer's good friend. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so we're almost wrapped, but this and the next slide are just a couple examples of some of the quotes that we get. And again, as is often the case in social, you're going to usually see a lot more negative stuff, right? People go online to complain way more than they go on to sing your praises. So whenever we get something good, we just cling on to it and we get really excited because it's motivation for us and it's a reminder that we're actually making a difference. So a lot of these are just people coming forward on their own sometimes, or even in private, just saying, hey, it made a real big difference. I really appreciate it. This is a pleasant surprise. And that's building loyalty, and that's building advocacy, right? At the end of the day, you're looking to create an advocate, somebody who's willing to go publicly to defend you and your product. And that's what we're always going for. And it's really hard to accomplish, but being consistent over a long period of time, building those relationships, being decent, right? All of these things factor in, making sure you have the right tools to help you do this at scale, and to be able to report it out and have it make sense from a business perspective as well, right? Obviously, without that, none of this works. But at the end of the day, it's about people, and it's about helping them and helping your brand establish itself as a credible, high-quality place to receive customer care. And I just love doing it on social because it's just so fun, and it's so fast-paced, and it's a huge area of opportunity for so many brands. So hopefully this has been helpful. And you can go to the next slide just for a few more quotes. And I guess I'll end it on that. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Armin. That was great, and there's lots and lots to take away there. And I'm interested to get the thoughts of Margaret and Calvin on this as well as we dig a little bit deeper. But yeah, firstly, I wanted to remind everyone there's been quite a few questions coming through. Do keep them coming. I'd say one of the main questions we've had is people asking about where can they get the recordings, and I guess for anyone kind of joining halfway through as well. We will be providing recordings afterwards, so you can go back through Armin's slides, and I'm sure you want to go back through and take a few more notes and listen. We should hopefully have those coming out within the next couple of days or so. But yeah, thanks for listening. And as I said, we have so many questions coming through that I think we're going to jump off script a bit and get to those. But I guess before we do that, you talked quite a lot about kind of values and foundations there, and I guess the actual culture of the company, and that coming through in really every message that you have and every interaction you have with a customer, Armin. I'd like to hear from, I guess, Margaret, coming to you first, kind of what approaches you have at Rogers to, I guess, really bringing kind of the values of the company into kind of everything you do and all your strategies.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we have actually been focusing on this year is connecting with customers, and so that we don't sound like a robot, and we are showing our human side. And so that means things like, simple things. So when somebody asks us about roaming, and they're going to, I'll say England in this case, we can connect with that and say, oh my God, I love going to England, or oh, my favorite destination, or wow, I'd love to visit that. Something personal, because I think that what Armin touched on, don't be a robot, make sure you're human, be authentic. I think that's important in social. I mean, I think it's important in customer service, period, but it really seems to help in social.
Okay, great. And yeah, I think it's kind of that, it's not non-transactional approach, I like to call it. It's not just another transaction with a customer. It's more of an actual conversation and getting to know them. How do you go about that? Is that kind of looking at historical conversations? Is it kind of just asking a few kind of probing questions? How do your kind of agents approach that, Margaret?
Well, it's when we're in a conversation with a customer and they've provided information to us, we will try to connect on that that nugget that they provided us. Like, they're obviously coming to us for a reason, and the sooner we can jump on that, the better the conversation goes. Okay,
sure. And Calvin, coming to you, how do you, I guess, bring the values and foundations of Comcast into everything you do? Is it the hiring of the agents that comes into, the training, kind of, what's your approach to that?
Yeah, I think to your point, the key thing is non-transactional. For us, really, we build products that live with people. So if you think about, whether it's the internet, if it's the phone service, it's the TV, the entertainment. So, I'll step back. So I'm a Game of Thrones person, and obviously, once that goes down, if there's an internet issue or TV challenge, it becomes an emotional. And so it becomes rather easy for our specialists to know exactly how that customer feels. Or perhaps it could be, my kid is having an exam and they need to submit this paper, and the internet service is not working. So it really comes to the care side of it. And we talk about the concept of personalization. And what we call, it's something we call professionally casual in our training. And we embed the concept of the brand voice. Think about the customer being next to you. And we have taken this concept even further from an executive perspective. In many of our senior executive offices, there's actually an empty chair, and it has the customer around it. I mean, it's actually pretty much it's an empty chair with this signed customer. And the reason why we did that, we said, hey, before any decision is made and before any interaction, think about that customer next to you. Think about your friends. Think about your family, and how would that feel? And it's very different. If you think about the concept of social, you have what you post. If it's in public, you have to be very cautious. If it's DM, it's easier. It's a lot of influencing of how someone interprets it. And so we give almost a free rein to some degree with boundaries, with relatively loose boundaries to our specialists, because we said, listen, we know you know these type of products, you use them, you know exactly if the phone isn't working, obviously, it's almost a life and death situation. So that has helped in that area. From a training perspective, it becomes relatively easy for us because what we look for is individuals that are just socially curious and they, hey, what's happening? And it becomes very different from a traditional contact center because there's that concept around, hey, we need to have someone who knows how to do all the Snapchat and Instagram. No, not necessarily. It's simply someone who knows how to interact with someone in a friendly manner. And so we do a lot of personalized training with our teams around being professionally casual and making sure that brand voice resonates when you're speaking to the customer.
Sure, that's great. I'm glad there wasn't any Game of Thrones spoilers there. I was about to warn you. And yeah, I love the idea of having the empty chair and constantly reminding everyone there if there's actually someone on the other side. So yeah, I guess to jump into some of your questions that are coming through. And you mentioned in your presentation that a single negative post has the same impact as 5 positive. Christine wants to know if you'd ever go back to a customer that originally wrote a negative post, and once you've resolved their issues, ask them to change the post to something positive. Is that something you consider?
We do not consider that. So I should clarify that we respond to every single actionable post we possibly can. And that includes posts where, let me back up. Because my client is a government organization, naturally it attracts a lot of political commentary. So we don't interact with political commentary. But what we do interact with is if somebody just says, you suck, or this thing is bad, right? Or they use a lot more colorful language than that. We will respond to those people even if they don't specify what their problem is. We first try to establish the relationship, establish the respect, and say, we'd like to learn more. How can we help? If you'd like to talk to us privately, you can do it here, something like that. But if the problem has been resolved, and if they say, okay, great, that's, thank you so much, we end it there, right? We say, you're welcome, please come to us anytime. Because we have found that as soon as we go back, if we try to ask them to say, hey, if you had a great time, share your positive experience here. Like, people don't really want to do that, right? It's like, at least for us, we don't feel as though that's something that I would ask my friend to do. So therefore, I'm not going to ask the consumer to do it. We've toyed with the idea of doing surveys and stuff, but those are more for like internal learnings as opposed to asking someone proactively to be an evangelist for your brand. We just want them to want to do it on their own. And when they do, it's so much more authentic than kind of forcing the issue, especially if they're just having come from a negative experience. Even if we've converted them through customer care, they may still kind of resent, at least in my view, being asked to do something like that.
Sure, I can see that. And Margaret, do you feel the same? Would you ever go back to someone and ask them to kind of change the post once it's resolved, or do you feel the same as Armin?
Yeah, we don't ask them to change their post. However, I have a bit of an offshoot to this. We have recently started to reply to customers who need support on Google Play and the App Store for any of the apps that they've downloaded. And what we've seen is that customers will go back and change their rating after we've helped them with their concern.
Okay, that's interesting. We actually had a couple of questions on reviews as well. I know Christine was asking about that one as well. Calvin, do you ever look at customer reviews? Is that something that comes under your remit?
We do look at customer reviews, but I'll step back a bit around the follow-up piece. So we've actually taken the concept of reputation advocacy, and so although we may have cured a customer's issue, we also go back to the customer as a follow-up. Hey, we knew you had the modem challenges, and we would love to, and we know you got it solved. Just checking in, making sure everything is working appropriately. And what we have seen, similar to what Armin said, is that organically is a surprise and delight to the customer. That, wow, you've solved my issue, and you've actually reached back out to me just to make sure everything is working appropriately. And we have seen customers proactively, without any nudge or any big brother saying, hey, don't do anything, just feel that personalization component. And in our space, obviously in entertainment and television component, we also look at the customer's social and DNA just to understand what their interest is. And at times, we sporadically we do a surprise and delight. So if we see a customer who likes the minions and really has a lot of the minions around their Facebook, we will then really sort of surprise them with perhaps to send in a few of those just to that particular customer because of the interaction. And that in itself we see has been really translating into customers just surprised beyond just, hey, you've solved my issue. I'm not just a transaction, but you really cared for me and followed up. And not only that, you actually know me as a person, and you've sent me something that just the fact that I have it on my Facebook, or perhaps I continually post about it, and that we've seen significantly has changed on our end, even just the sentiment of the brand.
Okay, great. Just looking at all the questions coming through, and Jose wants to plus one what you said, Margaret. He totally agrees with you about getting people to kind of, well, seeing the reviews kind of redone in the App Store, so that's great to hear. We talked a little bit about surprising and delighting your customers. I'd be interested to hear how you go about measuring that. We've got a few questions that Vivian's asked, particularly about how you measure sentiment and kind of what other metrics you track. So Armin, I know you spoke a little bit about that in your presentation. Can you speak a little bit to how you track metrics and what you look at the most?
Sure. So the sentiment tracking is actually built into the Lithium platform, and I know that different platforms do this in different ways, and there are ways to do it from an automated perspective using keywords and stuff, but because our team is so small, we're able to kind of really train everybody and monitor the usage of a manualized sentiment tracker. So basically what we do is there's a series of faces, a sad, a happy, and a neutral face, and we attach one of those to every single post that comes in using our own judgment. And I know that is subjective to a certain degree, but certainly it's our responsibility to monitor how that works, if it's being consistent, if these folks are getting labeled correctly in terms of their interactions, and being honest with ourselves, saying this person is not happy or this didn't work for some reason, so we're going to make a change if necessary. But the sentiment conversion rate is just a calculation that you do based on the conversations when they come in and the conversations when they come out, and all that data gets delivered to us through the platform. But other responses, other data also through the platform, stuff like your response time. You can set goals for yourself on how quickly you want to respond and how much time you give your team. The efficiency, how many responses per customer comment. So you can see the frequency and the amount of conversation that's happening. So it's not just a one-off each time, right? You want to have multiple responses to a person's issue. You want to have that dialogue back and forth. So just making sure that you're tracking total number of incoming posts, how many posts are in a total number of conversations, right? So if you have 10 conversations, but then there's 3 posts per conversation, that's 30 posts, right? So it's just keeping a sense of the number of unique individuals, and then how many comments are coming in at each one of those things. So there's a million data points that you could look at that are coming from all of these areas. Which channels are most popular? What times of day? Which posts are generating the most customer activity? Those kinds of things. But from us, we look from a speed efficiency standpoint and a conversation sentiment standpoint. So how do people feel when we're interacting with them?
Okay, great. Lots to take away there. I guess I'd like to cover a little bit on peer-to-peer service and how customers can help each other. So Margaret and Calvin, obviously both working for telecommunications companies, imagine if there's kind of an outage in an area, you get a sudden rush of people all from one area, and often it could help having customers kind of looking after each other and helping solve each other's problems. Margaret, I guess coming to you first, do you have any tips for encouraging customers to help each other out on social and I guess really use your customers to help answer each other's questions?
Yeah, actually, in our case, we have a community forums, the Rogers Community Forums, and that's the main place for peer-to-peer support. We do offer direct support as well in there, but really it's our customers who are helping one another solve their own technical issues. That even sometimes if they have a billing question or how does this work or what is this on my bill, without getting to specifics, people can be very helpful to one another, and so that's what we use to really drive peer-to-peer support.
Okay, great. And Calvin, are you using forums as well, or do you see it on social media at all? What's your approach to peer-to-peer support?
Yeah, it's funny, Seth. Yeah, consumers trust each other. I mean, it's interesting you see that. I mean, for us at Comcast, I mean, we have one of the world's largest, yeah, from a foreign perspective. We see about over 20 plus million unique visitors coming to our community per year, and that's significant. You know, we have over close to almost 50 million page views, and that in itself tells the entire story because, you know, consumers love we call do-it-yourself approach, and that has been one of the key drivers. And you know, in the world that we see here, it's, you know, if there's a solution already out there and it's a trusted and verified solution, you know, it's similar to what Margaret said. You know, we have community managers that really look and curate the help and support forum, and customers tend to be attracted to that. And you know, even more so, we leverage it forums even to the extent of what we call a deflector. So in our case, you know, if there's an issue specifically with any of the products that we offer, and we've seen a number of customers coming to the social platform, the different social platforms, we actually point our customers, hey, here's, you know, we do already have a verified and agreed upon solution, and here's where it is, and obviously you can read it at your leisure. And we have seen significant, from our case, you know, we've seen significant attraction to this help and support. Because customers really love to see it's already there, it's pre-canned, it's verified, and I've seen a number of people already view it, and so it must be true.
That's an interesting approach to do it. Just reading through, we've got lots and lots of questions coming through, and I know we're kind of getting towards the end of the webinar now, so I'm going to try and, I guess, wrap quite a few questions into one. So we've had a few people asking about keeping support in channel, you know, resolving in the channel that the complaint comes in from. We've also had people asking about sensitive information, and we've actually had someone working for a bank having that specific issue of, you know, when dealing with private information on social, what's the best way to go about it? So yeah, Ahmed, I guess coming to you first, I'd be interested to hear how you approach in-channel resolution, and also if anyone has any kind of private information, what the best way is to go about that.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the in-channel, we don't, I'm assuming that means off-platform. So we don't, or we try to avoid doing that as much as possible. So there are some places where we've responded to things. Instagram has been a case a few times. Yelp has been a thing a few times. But really, I stress the need for good tools that help to kind of do this for you, or to help you do it. And the main reason is because it keeps everything in one place, and it also helps you learn from it, and the data is all there, and it's much easier to track what you're doing, specifically those historical conversations, instead of just treating everything as a one-off. But as far as the privacy of information, the biggest thing there is really letting the consumer know in advance potentially what you can or can't help with and what you can or can't talk about. Say like, oh, well, you know, we can't get this access for you if you have limitations with that. If you work with an organization where you can easily funnel them to a secure conversation area, like a secure live chat or another resource, certainly do that. But if you're in a public setting, certainly like a public Facebook comment or something like that, if people share personal information, we hide it. We don't want that, you know, being on a public Facebook page, or, you know, even in a tweet, we may even suggest to them, you may want to delete that post if necessary. But we try to let them know, hey, we can't help you with X, but we can direct you to this other resource. So just being sensitive and maybe having an ongoing list or an FAQ, which can kind of help you navigate some of those conversations which need to be held privately or more securely.
Okay, sure. And Margaret, is your approach similar? How do you approach looking after, I guess, data privacy for your customers?
Yeah, so for us it's a bit different. We actually, so we'll bring everything from public into private. We'll always invite the customer to DM us or PM us, but we will not be exchanging private information in private. What we do is we actually have a secure form. It's an encrypted form. It's the same form, so it opens up, it's a link that opens up on a separate web page, and that is what we use in our live chat solution. And so customers enter their information on that form. The form's encrypted. It comes back to us. We verified this. You know, you, Aaron, are who you say you are, given this information, and then we continue the conversation in Facebook or Twitter. But we've encrypted. We've secured you on our systems, if that makes sense. So the customer is not leaving address, name, birthday, phone number, anything like that. in any other medium.
Yeah, it sounds like you completely got your strategy laid out there, and I think a lot of people can learn from that. Calvin, do you have anything to add on the privacy piece?
I think to similar to Margaret, we really try to pull the customer back into a private exchange, and like what Aaron said is we encourage the customers to obviously have the conversation one-on-one outside of the public view. On our end, what we're able to see some of the profile of the customer, so we can validate it as the individual. We do ask some obviously data personal question just to make sure the customer is the right individual from an account perspective. And so once they provide that, the personal information data, then we can validate that. I think one of the key areas, one of the questions that one of the individuals asks is from a privacy perspective. I mean, there are multiple ways. To Margaret's point, whether you send a link, sometimes we see customers that post their social security on public, and I think for us, it's really helping them understand that it's not just the fact that you're speaking to a brand, but everyone can see it. And the fact that we need to verify who you are, do you have the information? So we try as much as possible to collect the right information once we have that one-on-one DM conversation. But once it goes public, we do everything possible to protect the customers. And we've seen that they really appreciate the fact that we can share with them, hey, this is public, we're more than going to hide it, and we want you to be aware of it as well.
Okay, well, we're coming to the end of the webinar now, and I'm sorry we've kind of barely scraped the surface of all the questions we've got coming in. I will, I guess, send a copy of the questions over to the panelists afterwards, and if they've got any particular thoughts, I'll do my best to kind of follow up with you. But while I've got the panelists here, I thought it'd be great to hear from each of you, maybe a minute each, or a very short answer each on what you think is going to be the next best thing you can do for your social media customer support. So moving into 2018. What's the one big thing you'd do, or the one big element you'd look to in your strategy to add? So Armin, coming to you first, are there any big trends coming up or key things you'd recommend to people with their social media support strategies in 2018?
I think for us the biggest thing is just getting even faster. And I know that seems like a really simple response, but speed is so important, and not sacrificing the authenticity and that kind of relationship building that I talked about before. Because for us, 2 hours is it, and we kind of set that for ourselves due to the amount of commentary we were receiving and the size of our team. But we think we're at a place now where we can really get aggressive with that and maybe move that time even further close to maybe the 1 hour mark or hour-and-a-half mark. And for us, that means we're on it and we're moving as quickly as we can, and we're staying up to speed with everything that's happening. I mean, for example, my client just launched a totally redone website experience and an application experience, and the open enrollment period is just around the corner starting next month. So we have a lot coming up, and we're just preparing ourselves to make sure that we can improve our performance year over year while maintaining the same quality of performance as well. So as far as learning how to use our platform better as well. We've implemented some more automation this year, so improving the ROI on the work that we're doing, because we know how good it is, but it's important that we're able to sell it and to tell other people in other departments of what we're doing and why it matters. So for example, auto tagging at a much deeper level than we're doing now. So we're able to say, okay, this person's post comes in, the system detects X number of keywords, and we're going to find out that over the course of this month we saw this fluctuation in issues at these given times, and of a variety of issues, technical and otherwise. So just improving the amount of knowledge and data that we're extracting from all of this work that we're doing can really amplify the value of what we're doing. So I think it helps us sell it internally and also to kind of improve the performance of what we're doing overall, even just among our own team.
Okay, great. I know we're starting to run over a little bit now, but Margaret, really quickly to come to you, in 30 seconds, is there anything that you'd kind of add to that, or anything that you think people should look out for in 2018?
30 seconds or less. I'm going to tag on to Armin and say speed for sure. I mean, we're fairly fast, I'd say. Our response time is rather around 15 minutes or less. And you know what? I think what's happening is we're feeding the beast, because the customers are certainly starting to ask for even faster. And when we're single digits, they're pushing, hey, why aren't you responding even quicker? So I'm going to say that would be great for 2018.
Okay, and Calvin, coming to you, Again, speed is very important. Is speed important for your customer service in 2018 as well, or is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I'll make it simple. I mean, I'll go back to the original polling. 31% folks are just getting started. 3 things. Listen to the customer. You need to obviously find a tool. For a few of us, it's lithium that has been rather significantly as an aggregate. That's what you really have to do. The second thing is really building that case as to why you need social care. I mean, it's the ABCs. As strange as it may sound, we may be a different path. And the last thing I can tell you, messaging is going to be the big thing for 2018, and that's really what we are looking into. Whether it's, from an SMS perspective, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp possibly will be on the radar. Again, we have some of the playbook, and I encourage folks, please look me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to, have the off. But those are some of the key things for us here at Comcast.
Okay, thank you, Calvin, and thank you to all our panelists, Armin, Margaret, Calvin. It's been great having you involved, and it's gone really, really quickly, and I'm sorry we haven't got to everyone's questions again, but thanks a lot again for listening in. There will be, as I mentioned earlier, a recording of today, so you can recap and go over some of the takeaways, and feel free to kind of share with your teams as well. So that should be sent out in the next couple of days. I also wanted to let you all know about the Insight Customer Service Summit we've got coming up. Very much like this panel, it's going to be based around brands sharing their experiences and their challenges day to day. So there's some information on screen there. There's a link to go to if you want to check out that event. It's in New York on November 16th and 17th. We're looking at having around about 250 attendees this year, and you can see some of the brands already registered on screen there, so please do check that out. I will be sending around a discount code for people that have listened to this webinar as well, so if you can get to New York, make sure to give that a look too. And one final thank you to all our panelists, and I'll see you on the next Insight webinar. Thanks a lot for joining us.